Most people only watch the first 30 seconds of a video before they decide if they want to continue or not. So I'm going to hit this off at the curb and just tell you that the story of this video is very interesting and very important. But the start is a bit boring and dry. However, I promise you the topic is fascinating. It is important, and whether you know it or not, you're already a part of it. First, a summary. A few months ago, I made a video about a company you've never heard of called Zamza. Zamza bought the website of a software called File Converter from the software's developer Adrian Alad. They then proceeded to do borderline legal but ethically bankrupt shady marketing on that website. After the video was released, Alad replied to an earlier email of mine to him, and I had the pleasure of talking with him about his experience.
Do you mind introducing yourself for the recording?
Yeah, so I'm Adrien Allard. I'm the developer behind File Converter. It's like a hobby project for me that I did some years ago. But in the real life, I'm a video game developer.
My interview with Alad will be peppered throughout this video, but after our conversation, I decided to look more into the problems facing open source softwares, and in doing so, it led me down a rabbit hole that I did not expect. So, let's get started. Before we begin, I need to explain what open source is. If you already know what it is, you can skip to the timestamp here. Open source softwares are softwares that are released under any number of licenses that allows people to use, share, modify, examine, or even sell it under certain conditions. You should think of codes as art, and like all pieces of art, they are normally protected under copyright, but the copyright holder can choose to license them under these open source licenses. There are many reasons to do so, including moral reasons, philosophical reasons, and even business reasons. But many developers go for open source because they hold a strong belief that technology should be available to all who wants it.
I would say that I very agree with the value of open source software, mainly sharing the knowledge of. I did add access to programming knowledge because I did some engineering studies on that topic. So and why I wanted to share that for people that don't have access to that can also have some good tools.
The open source definition published by the Open Source Initiative is generally seen as the go-to guidelines for what defines an open source software. But to not drag this video out any longer than it needs to be, I will very clumsily simplify it to a single sentence idea. Open source softwares must have no other artificial barriers of entry to usage and understanding aside from honoring the integrity of the author. For this video, I will be putting aside all these scandals and criticism regarding the open source movement, not because they are not important, but because they aren't relevant. I'm talking about the idea of open source today and not the dramas behind the movement, so please don't add me in the comments about these. When you think about it, the idea of open source, regardless of its backroom dramas and level of success in implementation, is actually quite incredible. Incredibly mundane, I mean, but in a good way. For most of human history and for almost all human-made items, when you get a thing, it will do that thing it's made to do. For as long as the thing still works, you get to open it up, look at how it functions, and if you have the skills and resources, patents notwithstanding, get to make your own version of it. Even the first generations of video games and computers did the thing. Theoretically, every physical object you own right now lets you do this thing, even your computers and other hardware. If you have the capabilities, you could, theoretically, take a computer, copy all its parts, and make your own. You probably won't succeed because of reasons, but you can try. And open source is basically an attempt to return to that ideal for the digital world. Everything in the world basically works this way, except one. And those are black box programs. Also known as closed source programs or proprietary softwares, these are softwares that are often encrypted in a way that's almost impossible to open. You can use them with permission, but you cannot look into them, study them, or replicate them without decrypting them. And sometimes they can just choose to stop working without your input. It's the difference between a watch you own and, say, a clock tower that the town buys. You can see what the clock tower does, but the builder has put a lock on the door, preventing you from seeing how it works. There are many reasons for this, but aside from security softwares, which one can argue is selling security and not the software, the other reasons are mostly financial. Meaning that in a world without money, the thing that is fake, there's really no reason for such a process. This can lead to a couple of problems. The first is that you don't know what is in the clock tower. It can be running on the blood of freshly sacrificed puppies for all we know. It can be run on stolen codes. For example, Zamza has a very similar UI to Alert's file converter, but we have no method to open it up to check to see if they stole the codes from him or not.
Even after downloading the software user interface now is very similar to your file converter.
But it was before.
It was before.
I think maybe they used file converter to inspire their interface, but I checked at the time and it was already a context menu extension. But when you try to convert a file, it is uploaded to their server and then converted and then re-downloaded. And that was the whole point of file converter, is to not do that. To not send your files over internet, to keep your privacy and stuff like that. So
right.
From the user perspective, this is the main difference between file converter and the Zamzar product. You send your files, and in particular, you send your file to a private company that may use it, maybe.
Because I know certain companies, they do take like open source codes to use and then they add on to it. Do you feel like Zamza might have done that?
I don't know, because I don't search for it. It's very difficult to prove because
Proprietary software is like a black box.
yeah, they may have looked at my software and say, oh yeah, we need to implement that stuff too. So they take the ID and redeveloped it. Maybe they took the code too. If they did, it's illegal because my code is under a GPL license, so they can't use it for monetized purpose.
Right.
But it's quite difficult to prove, and so I don't know.
This is a problem that open source softwares just don't have. I talk about this specific problem in my first video on Zamza. Watch that if you want more context. The second problem are abandonwares. When the proprietor for a software stops functioning, they can decide not to share their source codes, which is the unencrypted version of their software. Doing so can effectively mean a program becomes abandoned. They cannot get updates, which means they may not be compatible with future technology, or they could stop functioning altogether. This is mildly infuriating when it happens to stuff like video games, but it can be life-threatening when it happens to something like surgical implants. This is another thing that can theoretically be solved with open sourcing. It's also a reason why when EA recently released the source codes of the Command & Conquer games as open source, everyone thought they had a stroke. Companies generally don't do this because it's not very profitable. I personally thought EA was like pulling an April Fool's prank or something. Like, I went to the good place. And the last is bloatware. For the past decade, companies have been constantly bundling unneeded things with their software or increasing their software beyond their core functionality for the physical products. For example, buy a VR headset and Meta will install applications that opens on computer startup without your knowledge. You don't know what it's doing or even why it's on, but it'll still be there. Is it collecting your data? Who knows? The idea of open source is that because others can check the codes, these kind of things can be made public. You'll then know what is bloat or not and get rid of or keep them accordingly.
Some companies are doing good software with real value and they sell them to make money, but a lot of companies are just doing some shitty software to just extract money from people,
Right.
and people don't know any alternatives, so they are quite forced to use that kind of software, and so it's also to keep this shitty software down.
Basically, As long as profit is not your number one priority, there are a lot of good things open source does. And even if profit is a motive, you can still make money from open source stuff by selling services like hosting and advertisements. WordPress is open source, Chrome is open source, but the companies behind them are valued in the billions. Those companies are terrible, because of course they are, but they still profit from open source initiatives. In fact, companies benefit from open source software so much, it's actually kind of disgusting. According to a study by Harvard Business School, the labor supply side value of open source, meaning the money we spend to develop open source software by hiring people through government fundings, donations, companies, etc., is about $6 billion in 2020. That's a lot of money. You might think it's not worth it to spend so much on stuff you've probably never heard of before. You probably don't use them after all. You're wrong, but we'll get to that. What if I told you that the demand side value, the amount of worth open source software is to the people using it in things like labor costs and development costs is 12 trillion dollars? That cannot be right. Is this real? It's real. That's a 200,000% return. What? To give you an idea of the scale of just how reliant IT is on open source softwares, $12 trillion from 2020 was worth more than Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Google, Tencent, AMD, Adobe, Sony, and Nintendo combined. That's all of IT. If open source softwares disappeared today, the amount we would need to spend to get back to where we are would destroy the global tech industry. And you want to know the crazy thing? An estimated 96% of their value is created by just 5% of open source developers. But their value is so ridiculously big that even the remaining 4% of value is worth over $500 billion. These are people like Adrian Allard and his file converter software, and the value of these softwares are very hard to quantify. But consider that Zamza is valued at nearly $500,000, and people like Adrian Allard received just a few hundreds of dollars from donations last year. The discrepancy should be obvious. File converter is one that simply converts a file from one format to another. It basically provides a UI for FFmpeg, another amazing open source project that you are using right now to watch this video on YouTube. It's being used on Mars. Not the point. File converter. I think the easiest way for you to understand the value of this is for me to show you.
Okay, so I have a couple of files here that I will be converting, and I will be using traditional software to convert them first and time myself with that. After that, I will time myself using FFmpeg. And after that, I will time myself using Adrian Allard's file converter. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so I just did everything using traditional method. I had a little hiccup in the middle because I forgot I had Handbrake, which is another open source software that helps do video encoding. And my brain farted, and I thought like I should be using MPC for some reason. Anyway, yeah. So traditional method, 4 different types of files to convert it into something differently usable. It's 3 minutes 42 seconds. Let's write this down. Okay, I'm gonna use FFmpeg now. Okay, so I just created my CMD and I'll be doing the conversion using FFmpeg. Hopefully I still remember how to do this. Okay, let's start the timer. Okay, so I just did the conversion using FFmpeg. The only one that I didn't do is the PDF because I'm not sure if FFmpeg can do PDF. You know what? I should give it a try. Let me just... Yeah, okay, so I don't think FFmpeg can do PDF, but as you can see, 2 minutes 51 seconds using FFmpeg. Final test, we'll be doing it with a file converter, and here we go. Yeah, I'm just spending this however many seconds just waiting. I don't have to do anything. It's like totally inactive. And there you have it. That's it. Adrian Allen's file converter just did everything in 1 minute and 12 seconds. A far cry easier than anything else on the board. And I want you to imagine if you're doing this for a living. If you have a lot of files that you need to convert for a living, how much is this software worth to me? I can't even put a value on it. It's so priceless that I'm making entire video series to defend this industry because of how valuable this software is.
I'm also a musician, so I work with a lot of audio files, and I wanted to be able to convert easily files from to MP3 at the time, and I was quite annoyed by all the converters that was existing behind a paywall with like scammy website, and it was quite complicated to find a good software. And then I found FFmpeg, that is an open source software to convert files, and it does everything. Like, it's quite impressive, but it's a command line file, so for me it's not an issue, so I started to use it. But I thought that it was quite I
Difficult
don't know.
for people to get into it.
Yeah, it's for people that don't have the technical knowledge. It's not easy to use, and we needed an interface to be able to easily use it for everyone. So I started to create an interface for using FFmpeg, and at this time I was inspired by 7-zip. So I did a small prototype that was only able to convert audio files. Some weeks later, I started to put it under the GPL license on GitHub. It's often the case with open source software. People get the risk is to be crushed by your own work.
Yeah. This is we're talking about software that would traditionally be made by companies with multiple programmers and resources, being
Yeah.
made by teams of like one or a small team of people.
Yeah, File Converter was a huge amount of work.
Yes, I will
I worked on
imagine
it like for like 4 years, 2 hours a day.
Oh wow, that's a
Around
lot of
2 hours
work.
a day.
People like Adrian Allard, individuals who spent months, if not years of their lives working on and maintaining basic codes, are the backbone of this entire freaking industry. We owe so much of what we have today to these people, which is why it pisses me off to find out there are companies and people out there screwing them over. I've already talked about what Zamza did. According to data provided by Alert, we can estimate that in the year following Zamza's acquisition of File Converter's old domain name, they siphoned off more than 35,000 downloads a year out of Alert's previous 100,000 a year. What this is something called open washing. Open washing is when an entity uses any idea of open access, such as open source, to clean up the image of their products in some way. Zamza did this by camouflaging itself over a previous open source project, allowing it to wash itself into search engines. It is now indexed in open source searches, even though it's not an open source product. I go into more details about this in my first video on them, but Zamza and White Owl are not the only ones doing this, nor are they even the biggest company. The generative and LLM AI industry is basically built on open washing. OpenAI, despite having open in its name, doesn't disclose the majority of how their models functions. The main contention, of course, it's its dataset. That's because it likely stole a metric ton of the shit it uses to train its AI, including from honestly open source stuff like codes and works licensed under Creative Commons. Like White Owl, it is then repackaged into a proprietary product, even though open source licenses requires anything that is derived from it to also be open source. If any AI software is trained on any open source data, those parts must be made open source. The same thing for any software. There is some room for gray areas, but if a software is made with open source codes, generally the software must also be open source. It's a whole ongoing thing. Microsoft once accidentally included open source codes in one of their programs, and when they found out, they legally had to change that program into open source. So something like White Owl legally shouldn't exist. Now you might be thinking, Fat Man, you keep mentioning it, but what is White Owl? White Owl is the thing that ruined my week. This essay was supposed to be a clean, straightforward look at how society treats open source softwares, but because of White Owl, I had to learn extra stupid shit. White Owl File Converter is a software sold on deals websites. If you don't know what these websites are, they basically sell softwares at a discount. Programs, IT packages, Photoshop brushes. Nothing about these deal sites are inherently wrong. I feel like I've said this before. They are providing a middleman service for companies. What's interesting are some of the people who use these sites to sell their stuff. The softwares they are dealing out are, as the kids put it, super sus, man. I feel old and my mortality is on display. Send help. White Owl is one of these repackaged software. It is a copy of Adrian Elliot's file converter with a new name slapped over it. This is illegal because not only did Adrian not give the permission to do so, but also because the open source license of Elliot's file converter doesn't allow for it. White Owl is just part of a pantheon of softwares that are released under similar circumstances by part of a community called I actually don't know what it's called. There's no official name for it. They are linked by various sub-interests. It's this weird intersection between the bro cultures, like AI bros, tech bros, and business bros combined. You know, blue checkmarks people. They've got a few interwoven internet communities selling the same shit. Vibe coders, indie hackers, SaaS. No, I'm not making any of these terms up. Yes, they are as stupid as they sound. And no, I do not have the time nor the willpower to get in depth into it. Somebody at Zitron and sees if he knows anything about it. If you're one of my very handsome, beautiful, and smart viewer who is also knowledgeable about cloud computing and wondering what does SaaS has anything to do with this video's topic, don't worry about it. It's not your SaaS. I mean, it's the same term, but they've just taken it and turned it into a vibe, like a rise and grind kind of thing. They use it in almost like an Amway Herbalife MLM fashion. Doesn't matter. I probably will end up doing a whole video about it in the future, depending on how much I hate myself. What matters for this video is that this community, this intersection of stupid, iOS, advocates a lot for using quote-unquote free softwares and programs to create softwares that they can turn around and sell quickly. With the AI boom, they have of course used AI, which is trained on stolen codes, including open source codes, script from GitHub like Adrian Elliott. White Owl is basically an early version of this iOS mindset with a focus on taking open source codes and repackaging them. Whoever made White Owl took Elliot's code and made a quick turnaround for a buck. The legal argument would be that they are not selling it as a software, but as a service. That's the SaaS part. Again, it's not what SaaS actually is, but that's just how they're using it. Ironically, Zamza is an actual company selling legitimate SaaS. Doesn't vindicate them of the shitty things they've done, but you know, it's funny, full circle and all that. There are hundreds of thousands of people split between these iOS communities, stealing millions if not billions of lines of codes from open source projects. A good chunk of them aren't even programmers, but instead business boys with AI brain. I don't know what to do with this information. I just have this in my head now. Somebody call at Zitron. But wait, there's more! With all that, you might be thinking, wow, if open source softwares are that important and they keep getting abused, are governments doing anything to protect the open source space? Well, here's some good news. Governments are screwing over open source too. Did I say good? I meant fucked. The CEO of the United States, Elon Musk, and their purge for government efficiency has hit the open source space because open source doesn't just apply to software. We're talking about information and technology. This includes scientific data like weather maps and medicine alongside fundings for anonymous web browsers and messaging apps. Let me be clear. Open source is a multi-trillion-dollar project that's shared with you for free, being defunded by billionaires trying to scrape a few $1 million from being paid out to the people who work on these projects who are earning just a few thousand. It's billionaires stealing trillions from people like you. This doesn't even include the direct defunding of agencies like the USAGM, which helps fund open source projects like Tor and Signal, anonymous softwares that are helping dissidents in repressive regimes right now. Open source is antithetical to authoritarianism and capitalism. That's why places with authoritarian leaders like China, Russia, Iran, and now the United States, alongside billionaires, hates it. We are getting fucked by them. But the actual good news is that none of what these individuals, companies, organizations, or governments do really matters much to open source. If you help. When Trump's administration started deleting information, a combination of Redditors, non-profits, and university entities swooped in to save a large chunk of it. Those information are now being preserved on an open source platform. I think Adrian puts it best.
Did you ever see like file converter getting a fork? Someone picking it up and doing even more stuff with it?
There is a lot of fork, yeah.
Oh, there is?
I did not took time to search for them, but when after I worked a lot on it, I was quite burned out of this project at some point, so I stopped working on it for 2 or 3 years, and people were trying to speculate on my death on GitHub. It was quite strange. So they try to fork it, and I think there is some fork that exists, but I don't know.
I think that's one of the good stuff about open source, that eventually there will be a fork of something if enough people use it.
This is the main, a very strong part of the open source software. It is duplicated everywhere, so it can die.
The licenses and laws, fundings and rules, all of them are just guidelines. But once you understand what the guidelines are meant to do, once you understand the foundational spirit of the open source movement, you can choose to not use them and just walk without the handrails. Because open source isn't a piece of software or a website. It is an idea. An idea that technology and information should be available to no want or need, that you should be allowed to know what you are using. Be you a beggar or a king, these things should be freely accessible to everyone. And it's not just about big open source projects like Firefox, which is living up to its name by being a burning hot mess right now. In the very same way this entire story spun out from the small software made by a single dedicated programmer, you can also help to spin out greater things. And the process to help do that is incredibly simple. Just use it. The more people participate, the harder it is to get rid of. Because then, if you want, you can even participate in the project. Fork it off. Make your own version. Improve it, change it, archive it, anything. You don't even need to know coding to participate. There are other stuff that you can do.
It brings me to the point of open source. I argue in my video that open source works best when more people use it, because more people can contribute. Do you feel like that it's a good way to explain it?
Yeah, it's true, but you need to have a lot of people using your software if you want to have contribution, because not a lot of people are comfortable with reading source code or complicated source code, and even less are able to read it, understand it, and make modifications the right way. During the first 7 years of life of FileConverter, I had no technical pull request, but early in the development, I added a localization system to be able to translate the software. And the first request I had was people that were saying, I don't know how to program, but I know my language, so I can translate it. And this is why FileConverter is translated in so many languages. It's people are doing this kind of contribution at first, and it's very important for the software to be used by a lot of people.
Right. So the translation,
so it's quite nice. But now I have a lot of contribution. but now it's me that don't have the time to review it and integrate it. So this is the other issue of the open source software. You need to continue to maintain your software if you want it to
Right.
live. So I may put like 1 or 2 days of work in it soon. So I answer to everyone. I integrate what can be integrated and make a new version of the software.
Open source belongs to us, to you and to me. It supports the idea that technology and information is powerful, and you should have access to them the same way as the rich. But it only works if we're willing to help and protect the people who made it possible. Before we get to the outro, Adrian has a plug.
You said you started your own game company. Anything you're working on? Yeah.
Yeah, I started my, game company last year, and I did I published a game on October last year.
Oh,
Its
congratulations.
name, the company is named Frog Collective, and the game is named Coleridge. So I invite you to test it if you play video games.
Thanks for watching. As always, a big thanks to all my patrons. Thanks again to Adrian Allett for speaking with me. Go buy his game, Coleridge, which is playing in the background right now. I'll be playing it on my next live stream as well, so join us if you want to check me out playing this thing. What? You know what I mean. And also check out File Converter if that's a software you think you'll need. All the links are in the description. You're probably wondering what all these things appearing on your right are. They are some apps and softwares that people use alongside their open source counterpart. Go and check them out and contribute if you can. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye.